For Max, as he began to remember the past, his time living in Brussels had only been an interlude. There was more to come. Both he and John had started meeting up on a regular basis. Kurt had only once come out with him, and they had all gone on well together. Kurt Verhagen was a small, tall, slim man who was Flemish-Belgian. He was shy about his ability to speak English, although from the few words he spoke together, Max realized that in fact Kurt spoke English perfectly well. He didn't appear to be the slightest concerned that Max and John were friends. He had a quiet laugh, but generally didn't smile too much. He didn't understand the two British men talking together, but tolerated it for the time being. Max liked him, although they didn't really speak much together. There were no meaningful conversations between the two men. It was clear that there was a trust between Kurt and John, and it was quite obvious to see from the two of them all together that there was a close bond. For the majority of the time, though, it was just him and John. They had visited La Reserve on a few occasions, but John knew all the gay bars in the centre of Brussels. There were quite a few. Most of them were situated in the side streets near to the Grand Place. Each had their own style, and each their own atmosphere. Some were modern with electric and fluorescent lighting, others were just small backstreet bars with their own customers. John knew them all, and all the bar owners knew John. For Max, this was an introduction to a whole new world. He was now meeting people he would never have met if he had been on his own. Many were local Belgians, and there were many who were expats like himself. Being English-speaking made it easier to mix and talk to as many people who were used to speaking English, even though they were more used to speaking French in the centre of Brussels. The bars started late in the evening. For Max, back in Britain, he was used to going out in the evening at about 8 or 9 p.m. The pubs and bars would then shut before midnight. Here it was more usual to start later and then go on drinking into the early hours of the morning. Soon found out that the majority of bars stayed open until dawn, if they still had customers. There was no closing time here. He found that difficult to get used to and had to be careful about how many beers he drank, especially if he was drinking the more stronger Belgian beers. With them both living within walking distance of the centre, they didn't have to worry about driving home. This meant that they could drink as much as they wanted and then could stagger out of the bar at some early hour of the morning, having had a great night. Kurt never appeared to mind that John was spending so much time with him. He had grown used to it. John was now, in a strange way, faithful to him, and as far as Max could see, his boast about sexual contacts and conquests was simply that, talk. He had never seen John do more than flirt with some good-looking guy. Max was beginning to relax amongst the gay life, and he didn't find it at all strange. He felt at home with the men. He could talk to them. They were all friendly and inquisitive about him. Max was starting to think that perhaps he was gay, since he got on so well with all these men. Sex, though, never came into the conversation. It was just a group of people out for a good night and to meet up with old friends. He felt at home here. He felt welcomed, and he felt that his old life in Britain was now beginning to fall away. He was not going back as often as he used to, and he had promised. He had found that more and more he was making excuses to Jane as to why he couldn't come back that weekend. He kept reminding her how expensive the flights were simply to return home for 2 days. In all honesty, the thought of returning back home to his old life was now growing distant. This was where he wanted to be, with these people in this place. His life back home had now gone, and he was beginning to think that it was gone for good. He started to realize that this is where he wanted to be. For how long he didn't really know. For now, though, he was enjoying himself and wanted to continue enjoying himself while he could. They had known each other for a few weeks when John had announced that he and Kurt were moving out of the apartment in the centre of Brussels. John blamed the owner of the apartment block and that they lived in, and it was not good. According to him, they had problems with the heating and it hadn't been fixed, and they were both decided that they'd had enough and they were moving out. John had found a house to rent in the town of Tavern. Tavern was on the edge of the city limits and had easy transport in and out of the city. Also, it was in the country, and they both thought it would be good for them to live somewhere away from all the noise and the traffic. It was a chance for them to give and to live and to have a normal life together without the temptation of having bars within walking distance. They set a date, which was a Saturday in a few weeks' time, and it arranged for the removal vans to take their belongings to their new house. John revealed that he, not surprisingly, knew the owner of a removal company, and so had got a good deal from him. As they lived on the second floor of the apartment block, they needed a furniture lift to take their things out of a window and safely down into the street. He had also had to arrange with the local authorities for the street to be closed so that the furniture lift could safely park outside the apartment without blocking the traffic. It had all been arranged, and all he needed now was a group of friends to help him with packing of boxes. They would also need help at the new house to make sure that the move went smoothly and as quickly as possible. Max had volunteered to help. He didn't mind. It was going to happen. It was going to happen on Saturday, so he wouldn't have to take any time off work. Also, it meant that John was now classing him as a close friend, which made him feel wanted. It made him feel as if he was really a part of a social group of friends. So Max agreed to help. The day arrived. The sun was shining, and it was a good day for moving house. Max made his way to John's apartment and found a small group of people standing outside in the street. The furniture lift had arrived and was extended up to a window in the apartment block. John's face appeared at the window and he looked down to the group. "What are you all waiting for?" he asked in a loud voice. "Come up here. We need help with the boxes." With that, he disappeared back into the apartment. There were 4 of them that had turned up to help. Max didn't know any of them, but after brief introductions, they made their way up the staircase to the apartment where the door had been left open. It was a bright, clean place with large windows through which the sun was shining. There were boxes everywhere. Kurt was busy filling one box after another while John had returned to the open bedroom where he was conducting the removal operation with the men who had operated the lift. Each one of them took a box and started moving them from the lounge into the bedroom, ready for them to be loaded down to the ground. Tosca the Spaniel had retired to a bed in a corner and was quietly watching the events take place. Max walked over to her, stroked her, and she wagged her tail. Gradually, one by one, they filled the boxes and then moved them into the bedroom, ready to pass down. As the time passed, they managed to enter the apartment and the boxes were passed down to the street and loaded into the moving van, which was parked further down the street. Finally came the furniture, the sofa, the fridge, and a variety of cupboards. One by one they were loaded until the apartment was finally emptied. They looked around and that was it. The job was finished. Max and the others left Kurt and John to finally close the apartment and headed down to the street. The moving van had already finished loading and the men were closing the door, ready to move off to the new house. Finally, they were all together in the street watching the removers drive off. They had 2 cars between them, which was enough for them to drive on and follow the vans. Kurt, John and Max in one car, the others following behind in another car. It wasn't a long drive from the centre of Brussels to Tavern. It would take them about 30 minutes, following a variety of streets out of the city centre, and towards Tavern. They arrived in the front of the new house in the early afternoon. It was located in a country road with houses on either side. Opposite was a rather grand house with security gates. This house, though, had an open driveway with space for 2 cars to park. At this moment, though, the removal vans were parked in the driveway, ready for the house to be opened, and then they would move the furniture in easily through the front door. It was a bungalow with a well-kept small lawn outside it. There was also another small lawn that ran along the edge of the property and led towards the back of the house. It was modern, with large windows on one side. On the other side were smaller windows, and the front door was in the middle of the house. A short pathway led up to the driveway to the door. It was a good-looking house, which sat next to the other houses, and it appeared to fit into the area. For a moment, Max felt jealous. Although his own house back in Britain, this was nothing like it. He was beginning to wish he could move to this house here rather than having to go back to Birmingham. John got out of the car and walked quickly up to the front door. He had the keys in his hand and he was eager to get inside as soon as possible. He unlocked the door and then quickly turned around. "Come on," he said in a loud voice. "Don't just sit there. We've got to get all this stuff into the house." The others had turned up in the other car and then parked further down the street. The removers had by now opened their van and were beginning to unload the furniture. One by one, they took something out of the van and carried it into the house. The inside of the house was bright and clean and much larger than the apartment that they had left. There was a good-sized kitchen that was empty. A window in the kitchen looked out onto a large back garden. There was a door next to the window which led out into the back garden. There was also another door which led into a large L-shaped lounge. There were 3 large windows which made it appear bright and welcoming. At the far end, 2 wooden doors led back into the entrance hall and next to the front door. John gave them a quick tour of the house. There was a bathroom and 3 bedrooms. Each one was a good size, and the one that John and Kurt would share was the largest. The tour ended quickly as they realized that they had a lot of work to do and quickly left the house and gathered more furniture and boxes. The work went quickly, with all of them being efficient and bringing items into the house one by one. The removal men handled the larger furniture, including 2 beds and a variety of other furniture details. After about an hour or so, the job was finished. The removal men closed the van and finally drove off, leaving them in the house looking at the boxes which appeared to cover the lounge floor. John found a pack of beers from one of the boxes and passed them round to everyone. They cracked open the cans and started to drink. "Cheers," he said, raising his can. The others responded. "That was a good job done. I thought it would take longer, but thanks, guys. You've been a great help." They raised their cans again in salute and drank their beers back. It had been a warm day and they were all thirsty. "Good luck in your new home," someone said. They all saluted again with their cans. "Good luck, good luck, good luck." Yeah, they all responded. When they had finished their beers, both Kurt and John decided they would start and make the house livable. The other, including Max, then decided that it would be better to leave them to sort out their own house. Once again wishing them luck, they all climbed into the car and headed back to Brussels. It had been a good day. For Max, it had been fun. It was a day he would look back on with a warm glow and a smile on his face.